election committee has to endorse the candidacy. Then we have to elect a House Speaker, and then the third step would to have joint voting between the lower house and the upper house. That's where it's politics of elected by 25 million people against appointed of senators from military coup back in the last decade. So that will be the kind of struggles that people are looking at. However, I have my scenario analysis of various scenarios that could come out, and we have prepared a strategic response to prepare for each of the scenarios that might take up.
So in terms of one of the scenarios, I mean, how do you overcome the powerful sort of voting bloc in the Senate that has clearly demonstrated time and time again that they prefer a military candidate? How do you overcome that?
Well, it's not just an absolute roadblock only from the senators, because the unity of the senators is not the same as it was before 4 years ago. For the past 4 years, the significant shift in public opinion and the kind of consensus that's already been developed and shown in the election. So it's not always the case that the senators, even if it's military appointed, will decide on the vote as before in the previous election. So I think if we keep communicating and we keep explaining what we're trying to do to the country, how well we mean for the future of this country, I think that will not be a significant roadblock. And the price to pay, the cost of going against 25 million votes here in Thailand will be very hefty.
So just in terms of the outcome of the election here, one of the things that has worked in your favor, it appears, is the fact that your party won by such a large margin. Had the outcome of the election been that much more hazy, that much closer, this would be a very different scenario for you and your party, just in terms of how much harder the weeks ahead would look.
Well, that's about, weight of the politics. It depends on the desire of the voters, how they wanted to see the country going forward. And it turns out to be 50 million vote for me, which is almost like 2.5 times more than the previous election. Even with all that we went through for the past 4 years, we still won by a large margin, and that gave us the consensus to form the government and hopefully to deploy our policies that we have promised to the people of Thailand before the votes.
So what would it look like if the outcome of this election is subverted by the military? I mean, I mentioned in one of my earlier questions that, it's one thing to win the election in Thailand, it's another thing to actually emerge as the winner, as in become a prime minister. What's at stake here if the military subverts the will, as you point out, of 25 million people?
Well, we have to minimize that risk. I agree with the question that there's two different things from winning an election and the roadmap to become the prime minister. However, I have the plan to bridge that gap between what's on paper and what's on the streets in terms of reality of the politics. So even if the election is done, but politicking is taking shape, and like I answered you previously, that we have 2 or 3 teams just to make sure that we minimize the risk of subversion, and hopefully that we keep communicating to the people, and that will become the kind of desire, the kind of consensus that allows me to bridge the gap.
When you think about what happened in 2019, your party, the Move Forward Party's predecessor, the Future Forward Party, won the 3rd most votes back in 2019, and shortly after the election, the party ended up being dissolved, and the leaders ended up being banned from politics. So that sort of gives you a taste of what could happen in this scenario. Looking back at that, at what happened 4 years ago, how much does that concern you?
I'm not worried, but I'm not careless as well. I mean, I've been in politics in Thailand for the past 20 years, started from a very junior position, so I can see the brutality of politics all around the world, not just Thailand. So I think what we need to do, just to make sure that we're not concerned about this, is to anticipate scenarios that could happen and learn from the past, and we prevent it from happening. I have a strong legal team. I have a strong practices just to make sure that we don't give out any easy targets for party dissolution once again, or to get me out of my authority for no reasons. Yes, there's professional and personal attacks against me, but I have prepared in the past in order to clarify and explain and making sure I have a strong legal basis for anything that comes my way to the government house.
So these elections, of course, were monumental, just in terms of the number of young people, the sheer number of young people coming out and showing their sort of ardent opposition to military rule. With that responsibility, just walk us through some of your policy priorities for Thailand over the next sort of 4 to 5 years.
Well, your question is 2 or 3-fold. First of all, young voters came out a lot, about 5 million new first-time voters here in Thailand. But the entire generation, not just the first-time, not just the young, the middle age or the old, with the historical voting turnout of almost 76%, that's pretty sensational. In terms of the second fold, you asked me about policy priorities. It's actually 3 Ds. First is to demilitarize, second is to demonopolize, and third is to decentralize Thailand. I think with the 3-pronged approach, that's the only way that we can fully democratize Thailand and make sure that Thailand is back to business, Thailand is back on the global arena, making sure that the country is contributing as well as benefiting by the new definition of globalization.
All right, Mr. Peter, thank you so much for being with us, and best of luck as your party moves forward and forms a coalition.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, you're very welcome.
I appreciate it.